Billionaire businessman Harold Grant owned half of the city. With 5 companies under his name and properties across states, people saw him as untouchable. Yet behind all the power and suits, Harold was a lonely man. He had no wife, no known children, only workers who feared him and assistants who nodded to every command. His heart had grown cold after losing his high school love, Clara, years ago. "I built all this from nothing," Harold would say proudly. "Love slows you down. Money never betrays." But he didn't know that someone he had once ignored would come back into his life, not with a knock, but as a whisper from the streets. Clara had left Harold without a word after college. She found out she was pregnant, but feared he wouldn't want the baby. He was already chasing contracts and success, barely making time for anything else. So she left town quietly and gave birth to a baby boy named Elijah. Life was hard. She did cleaning jobs and odd work to feed the child. Elijah grew up hearing only one thing from Clara. "Your father is powerful," but he never looked back. He didn't hate the man, but life on the streets shaped him differently. By 17, Clara passed away from a long illness, and Elijah was alone. Elijah survived by collecting scraps, shining shoes, and sometimes begging. He refused to steal. "Mama taught me better," he often whispered. He had a sharp mind, loved books, and spent evenings near the city library reading from the open windows. People passed him daily, some throwing coins, some ignoring. One car always caught his attention, a black Bentley that passed every evening, its windows tinted, its pride heavy. That was Harold, unknowingly passing his son on the street every single day. It was raining hard. Elijah had no jacket, just a torn hoodie. He sat near the entrance of Grant Towers, Harold's company headquarters, trying to stay dry. That day, Harold had an important meeting and walked out with his umbrella. But his wallet dropped unknowingly near the entrance. Elijah noticed it, picked it up, and ran toward the tall man. Sir, you dropped this." Harold turned, stunned. Few people ever chased him without fear. He collected the wallet, looked at the boy, and nodded. "Thanks," he said coldly. Elijah stood there a bit longer. "You're welcome, sir." But Harold had already entered his car. Harold couldn't forget the boy's eyes. Something about them, familiar. The next day, he asked his driver, "You see that boy who hangs around the library? The one in the gray hoodie?" "Yes, sir. He's always there." "Get his name." From that day, Harold's security discreetly followed Elijah. They watched his routines, reported where he slept, what he read, and how he helped other beggars. He once gave half his food to a blind man, one guard reported. Harold remained silent. Something stirred in him. One morning, Elijah woke up to find a clean box near his spot. Inside were 2 new shirts, some snacks, and a note that simply read, "Keep being kind. Someone is watching." Elijah smiled. Maybe there are still good people in this world. He wore one of the shirts the next day and walked to the library. That afternoon, Harold stood far away in a parked car, watching. He didn't know why he had sent the gift. Something inside was waking up, a father's instinct, perhaps? Curious and still unsure, Harold told his assistant, "I want to meet that boy. But not as me." He disguised himself, wore jeans, an old jacket, left his watch at home. He met Elijah outside the library. "You read much." Elijah looked at him. "Yeah. Books don't judge you." The two talked for hours. Harold introduced himself as Henry, a retired teacher. Elijah opened up. "I never knew my father. Mama said he was rich but didn't care. I don't hate him though. I just want to be better." Harold swallowed hard. What if he didn't know? Elijah shrugged. Still his job to find out. That night, Harold couldn't sleep. He contacted an old friend from college. "Do you remember Clara?" "Yes," the friend replied. "She vanished after graduation." Harold hired a private investigator. 2 weeks later, the truth surfaced. Clara had died 5 years ago. She had a son, his son. Harold fell into his chair, staring at the report. "His name is Elijah Grant," the file read. Harold sat in silence. All his wealth meant nothing. He had a son who had lived without food, shelter, or love, because of his own ignorance. How do I face him? He asked himself. His assistant suggested a DNA test. Harold agreed, secretly collecting hair from Elijah's hoodie during their next meeting. The results came in. 99.9% match. Tears rolled down Harold's face for the first time in decades. He arranged to meet Elijah at a quiet diner. This time, no disguise. I need to tell you something, Elijah. The boy looked up. Okay. Harold's voice trembled. I'm not Henry. My real name is Harold Grant. I'm your father. Silence. You're joking. I'm not. I didn't know about you. Not until recently. Elijah's lips parted but no words came. He stood up, heart racing. You left my mother. You left me. I didn't know. I swear it. But I want to make it right, if you'll let me. Elijah didn't return Harold's calls for 2 weeks. He was angry, confused, hurt. How could he believe the man who ignored his mother now claimed to care? One night, he visited Clara's grave. Mama, what do I do? A gentle wind blew through the trees. The next morning, he walked into Grant Towers, barefoot, still in his hoodie. I want to talk to him. In Harold's office, the air was thick with emotion. Elijah entered slowly. Are you here to scream at me? Harold asked softly. No. I'm here to listen. For now. They talked for hours. About Clara. About life. About pain. I'm not here for your money, Elijah said. Harold nodded. I'm not here to buy love. Just to earn it. They shook hands. For now, it was enough. Harold made Elijah his legal heir, not for publicity, but because he believed in him. He gave him a chance to study, to learn the business. Elijah rose fast, not because of the name, but because of his humility. People began calling him the CEO in sneakers. He never forgot where he came from. He set up foundations for homeless youth, named Clara's Light. Years later, Harold sat beside Elijah at a press conference. I built an empire, he said. But I didn't truly live until I found my son. Elijah added with a smile, sometimes the richest treasures are found in the dust. The crowd clapped. But the loudest applause came from Harold's heart, finally at peace. Elijah sat at his new office desk, a minimalist space overlooking the city he once walked through barefoot. The brass nameplate on the desk read, Elijah Grant, Director of Outreach and Innovation. Yet he still wore sneakers. One morning, a board member pulled him aside. You've earned your seat, Elijah. But you should start dressing like it. Elijah smiled. I didn't come this far to pretend I was never down there. He pointed through the glass at the street below, where he once begged with cracked lips and a rumbling stomach. He was a Grant. But on his terms. Harold surprised Elijah one evening with a tour of a new property. I want to show you something. It was a large, quiet building near the edge of the city. Newly renovated. Clean, bright halls. Private rooms. A full kitchen. I bought it in Clara's name, Harold said. To house homeless teens. We'll fund it together. Elijah was speechless. He walked the halls, touching the walls with reverence. Mama would have cried. She always said, if I had money, I'd shelter every child on the street. Harold rested a hand on his son's shoulder. Now you can do it for her. News outlets exploded with headlines. Billionaire discovers long-lost son on the streets. From beggar to boardroom, Elijah Grant's story inspires a nation. Interviews, magazines, talk shows, they all wanted a piece of Elijah. But he wasn't interested in fame. He appeared on one show, just one. When asked what he wanted the world to learn from his story, he answered, don't judge the man on the corner. He could be someone's son. He could be someone's second chance. Harold, watching from the backstage monitor, wiped his eyes quietly. Despite the progress, the road wasn't smooth. One night, during a gala, an old college friend of Harold's pulled Elijah aside. I knew your dad back then. He was cold, even to Clara. The words stung. Later that evening, Elijah confronted Harold. Is it true? Were you ever going to marry her? Harold's face darkened with shame. I was young. Foolish. I put business first. If I had known. You didn't ask, Elijah said. A pause. Then Elijah whispered, I'm trying. But it still hurts. Harold nodded. Then I'll keep trying too. One afternoon, Elijah stood before a lawyer with Harold. Sir, you want to transfer 30% ownership of Grant Enterprises permanently? Harold nodded. He's not just my son. He's my legacy. Elijah hesitated. I don't want petty wealth. You're not getting it, Harold said firmly. You're getting what should have been yours. The lawyer drafted the papers. Elijah signed last. His hand shook, not from nerves, but from the weight of a future his mother only dreamed of. Elijah had one more thing to do. He returned to the run-down street he once lived on, bringing photographers and news crews with him. But not for vanity. He walked straight to an old shoe shiner named Mr. Abel, who once shared bread with him during his hungriest nights. You remember me? Elijah asked. The man squinted. The quiet one, who read books near the gutter? Elijah laughed and hugged him. That week, Elijah had Mr. Abel moved into a warm apartment. Others followed. Food programs. Medical care. Clara's light grew. Because a true heir never forgets the road he walked. With Elijah's rise came new challenges. People began to whisper. He's just a charity case. He got lucky being Harold's son. He doesn't deserve the board seat. Elijah ignored most of them, until he overheard it from someone close. Sandra, a junior executive he'd often shared lunch with, spoke behind his back in the elevator. He's kind, sure. But if he weren't a Grant, he'd still be begging. Those words hit hard. That night, Elijah skipped dinner and stared out of his penthouse window. For the first time since leaving the streets, he felt poor again, not in wealth, but in spirit. Harold walked into Elijah's apartment uninvited, holding 2 cups of coffee. Why so quiet? Elijah sighed. Money doesn't erase people's opinions. Harold nodded. They hated me too. When I started, people called me a fraud. Said I was pretending to be what I wasn't. What did you do? Elijah asked. I outworked them. Then I outlived their doubts. He placed the coffee beside Elijah. You're not here to prove you're a Grant. You're here to be Elijah. At a bookstore event for young readers, Elijah gave a short speech about resilience and donated 100 books. There, he met Ariel, a quiet children's author with glasses, a huge heart, and no idea who he was. You speak like someone who's lost a lot, she said afterward. Elijah smiled. I found more than I ever lost. They spoke for hours. No mention of money. No whispers of his past. Just books, street poetry, and memories. For the first time in a long time, Elijah laughed like a boy. Just when things began to feel calm, an anonymous email leaked to the press. Elijah Grant is a fraud. Not the biological son. Headlines exploded. The DNA results were called into question. Lawyers, media, even shareholders began whispering doubt. Where's the original test? Was this fabricated to gain access to the company? Harold was furious. Elijah was heartbroken. The same city that clapped for his rise was now clapping for his fall. Let them talk, Harold snapped. I'll shut this down. But Elijah said, no. I'll prove it myself. Again. Elijah voluntarily submitted to another DNA test, this time with 2 independent labs and live-streamed verification. He faced the cameras without blinking. If the truth cost me everything, I'd still want it. While the world waited, Elijah disappeared for a week. He went back to the shelter, worked in the kitchen, swept floors, helped wash wounds. I'm still Elijah, he whispered to himself. With or without the name. The results arrived with flashing headlines. DNA confirmed again. Elijah Grant is Harold Grant's biological son. The silence afterward was louder than the accusation. 2 months later, Harold suffered a mild stroke. He was 69, overworked, and had spent decades living without love before Elijah came. Lying in the hospital, he held his son's hand tightly. I don't have much time left. I know it. Elijah's eyes welled up. Don't say that. I'm proud of you. But you have to be more than what I was. Led differently. Elijah squeezed his hand. I will. For you. For Mama. For everyone on the street still unseen. Harold officially stepped down and handed full control of Grant Enterprises to Elijah. Some investors panicked. Others applauded. Elijah, in his first boardroom speech as CEO, wore no suit, just a crisp white shirt and gray slacks. I am not here to be a copy of the past. I'm here to redefine what power looks like. Integrity. Compassion. Growth. That's our future. The room was quiet. Then came a slow clap from Harold's old rival, Mr. Carlton, who stood and said, "That's the speech your father never gave. Well done, son." One evening under the stars, at the rooftop of Clara's light shelter, Elijah took Ariel's hand. "This building, it raised me. You helped rebuild me." He pulled out a simple ring, nothing flashy. "I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I want you in it. Will you marry me?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Yes. Not because you're Harold's son, but because you're Elijah." They kissed, surrounded by string lights, laughter from the street, and echoes of a once-lost legacy restored. Harold's health declined faster than expected. Within months, he became bedridden. His once firm voice softened, and his proud eyes grew tired. Elijah visited him every evening, sometimes reading aloud old letters Clara had written, letters Elijah found hidden in a wooden box she left behind. One evening, as rain pattered gently against the window, Harold turned to his son. "I used to be afraid to die," he whispered, "because I had nothing to leave behind but buildings. But now, I leave behind you." Elijah leaned in. "You didn't just leave me behind, Dad. You raised me in your own way, just late." Harold smiled weakly, and with trembling fingers, gripped his son's hand. "Live better than I did, and tell your children who their grandfather really was." Those were Harold Grant's final words. He passed in his sleep that night. Harold's funeral was grand, yet deeply human. Elijah insisted on hosting it at Clara's light shelter, not in a high-end hotel or cathedral. "We're not just honoring the businessman," he told the press. "We're honoring the man who searched for his son, and found him." People who had once judged Harold came forward to share stories. How he gave anonymously, how he funded surgeries, how he changed policies for single mothers. Elijah gave the final eulogy. "He wasn't perfect, but he gave me the most precious gift, his name and a second chance. And now I carry both with pride." Elijah and Ariel decided on a small wedding with only 30 guests. No tabloids, no extravagant halls, just a garden surrounded by trees, a few close friends, and the shelter kids as flower bearers. Ariel wore a simple lace gown. Elijah wore gray. During their vows, Elijah said, "I once believed I'd always be alone. But you loved the version of me that had nothing. Now, I give you all I have." They kissed under the blooming jacaranda tree, while birds flew overhead and the city hummed quietly below. A year later, Ariel gave birth to a baby boy, Clarence Grant, named after Clara and Harold. Elijah wept the moment he held him. "I never knew what it meant to be held by a father," he whispered. "But I'll learn how to hold you the way I always wanted to be held." Clarence's room had no gold trim or diamond chandeliers, just sunlight, books, and a mural of Clara holding a child, painted on one wall. As Elijah focused on family, a storm was brewing in the company. A trusted executive, Mr. Rance, who had served Harold for years, was caught embezzling funds from the Clara's Light Foundation. Board members were shaken. "You must have known," one accused Elijah. "I didn't. But I'll make it right." He launched an audit, fired Rance publicly, and donated $1 million of his own savings to keep the foundation running. "I won't let greed tarnish what we built." He told the press, "If protecting my father's legacy costs me everything, so be it. I won't fail the people he left behind." On what would have been Clara's 60th birthday, Elijah unveiled the Clara Grant Library, a state-of-the-art reading center and shelter hybrid. He stood before the crowd, holding Clarence on his hip. "My mother taught me to read under the flicker of a broken street lamp. Now, no child should have to squint in the dark to dream." The crowd stood in silence. then erupted into applause. Elijah had not just restored a legacy, he had created a new one. One evening, as Elijah sorted old photos in his study, he found a letter tucked in a photo frame, addressed to him, in Clara's handwriting. My dearest Elijah, if one day you meet your father, don't hate him. Life does not always give second chances. If it does, take it, hold it, and make it count. Love loudly. Forgive deeply. And never let the past define your worth. Love, Mama. Elijah placed the letter in a glass frame beside his awards. Some honors belong on walls. Others belong in the heart.